Antarctica, the most hostile place on Earth, and somehow roughly 4 million penguins have decided this is home. They survive here by doing one thing above everything else: staying together. The colony is everything: its warmth, its safety. It's the difference between life and death in a place that will kill you in hours if you're alone. And then there's this guy. In 2007, documentary filmmaker Werner Herzog captured something that no one could quite explain: a penguin walking away from his colony, away from the sea, away from food, away from everything that would keep him alive. Just walking. Herzog tried to stop him. His crew turned the penguin around, pointed him back toward the water. The penguin looked at them and kept walking toward the mountain. Nearly 20 years later, that clip went viral. Millions of people watched a small bird walk calmly toward his own death and felt something. Some people laughed, some people cried, a lot of people said, same. But here's the thing nobody really answered: why did he do it? Not in a poetic way, not in a sometimes we all want to escape way. I mean, actually, biologically, neurologically, what was happening inside that penguin's brain that made him walk away from everything that should have kept him alive? And why, when you look at that question closely enough, does the answer start to sound uncomfortably human? To get there, we first need to talk about penguins, all of them, because honestly, they are so much weirder and more fascinating than you think. Let's go. Before we can understand that penguin walking into the mountains, we need to understand what a penguin actually is. And I promise you, it's weirder than you think. Let's go back, way back, about 60 to 65 million years ago. The dinosaurs have just gone extinct. The world is reshaping itself, and somewhere off the coast of what we call now New Zealand, there is a bird. It looks a bit like a cormorant. It can fly, and it is about to make the worst decision in aviation history. It starts spending more and more time in the water. The food down there is incredible, and slowly over millions of years, its wings stop being wings. They get shorter, denser, heavier. They become flippers. At some point, this bird could no longer take off, and you know what? It didn't care, because underwater, those stubby little flippers let it hit speeds of up to 25 kilometers per hour. Scientists actually call it aquaflying. It doesn't swim, it flies through water. Fun fact: penguins' closest living relatives are albatrosses, the birds famous for the longest wingspans on Earth and for flying thousands of kilometers across open ocean. Same family tree, very different career path. So, penguins are birds. They have feathers, they breathe air, they lay eggs, but almost everything else about them is built for one thing: surviving somewhere that should kill them. Take the cold. Emperor penguins live on sea ice in Antarctica where temperatures drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. That's colder than most freezers you'll ever stand next to. How are they not dead? Three things. First, feathers. Penguins have more feathers per square centimeter than almost any other bird. Densely packed, waterproof, and overlapping like roof tiles. Second, blubber, a thick layer under the skin that insulates like a wetsuit. And third, and this one's my favorite, their blood. Penguins have a system called counter-current heat exchange. The warm blood flowing from their core to their flippers runs right alongside the cold blood coming back and transfers its heat before it gets too far. Their flippers can be almost the same temperature as the ice, and their organs stay warm. It's basically a built-in thermostat that evolution designed over millions of years. Fun fact: penguins have knees, real ones. They're just hidden completely inside their body, tucked up under all that blubber. Now, here's where it gets properly strange. Penguins drink salt water, not by accident, on purpose. They have a special gland just above their eye called the supraorbital gland, which filters the salt out of their blood after they drink. The salt then drips back out through their beak. Essentially, penguins have a permanent runny nose, but make it science. Fun fact: penguins can also projectile poop up to about 40 centimeters away from their nest, which scientists have actually studied and published papers on. Seriously? The title of one paper is Pressures Produced When Penguins Poo. This is real science, baby. And navigation. This one matters and we'll come back to it later. Penguins find their way home using a combination of the sun's position, the stars at night, and Earth's magnetic field. They have some kind of internal compass that we still don't fully understand. They can travel hundreds of kilometers out to sea and return to the exact same nesting spot year after year, which makes it all more strange when one of them doesn't. Before we meet the full family, we need to spend a moment with the most extreme penguin of all, the emperor. Emperor penguins breed in the middle of the Antarctic winter on purpose. While every other animal with any sense has left or gone underground, emperors march up to 120 kilometers inland away from the sea to breed on the ice. The female lays one egg, then she hands it to the male and walks back to the ocean to feed. The male stands there in the dark in minus 50 degrees for up to 115 days, without eating, just balancing one egg on his feet under a flap of warm skin. He loses nearly half his body weight. He doesn't move, he just endures. They survive by huddling, thousands of males packed so tightly together that the center of the group reaches 37 degrees. They rotate slowly like a living organism, so every penguin takes a turn on the cold outside edge. Nobody stays in the warm forever. Nobody gets left on the outside permanently. It's one of the most cooperative behaviors in the entire animal kingdom. And that's what makes what we saw at the start so haunting. A creature built entirely around the group, built at a biological level to survive only with others, choosing to walk away from all of it. But first, let's meet the rest of the family. Alright, there are 18 recognized species of penguin. We're not going to cover all of them, we'd be here for 3 hours, but I want to introduce you to a few of the most interesting ones because the penguin family is genuinely one of the most diverse groups of animals on Earth. And I mean that. We're talking about birds that live on the equator, in rainforests, on volcanic islands, and in temperatures cold enough to kill a human in minutes. Same animal, completely different worlds. Let's do a quick tour. The Gantu, the speed demon. The Gantu penguin is the fastest underwater bird on the planet. Full stop, it can hit 36 kilometers per hour underwater. For reference, the world record for human swimming is about 8. The Gantu would lap Michael Phelps without breaking a sweat, and Phelps will be destroyed. They also have bright orange-red beaks and a white stripe across their top of their head, which makes them look permanently surprised, which honestly is the correct reaction to being that fast. Fun fact, Gantu penguins propose with pebbles. A male will search an entire beach to find the smoothest, most perfect stone he can, then present it to the female. If she accepts, she places in the nest. If he gives her a bad pebble, she rejects him. Penguin dating is brutal. The little blue, the commuter. Meet the smallest penguin in the world, standing about 30 centimeters tall and weighing just over a kilogram. The little blue penguin, also called the fairy penguin, lives in Australia and New Zealand. It's objectively the most adorable animal we will discuss today. Every single evening, just after sunset, they come ashore in groups, always in groups, never alone, and waddle up the beach to their burrows. This happens every night. It is so reliable and so charming that in several Australian towns there are dedicated grandstands where tourists pay to watch it. They call it the Penguin Parade. It's exactly what it sounds like. Fun fact, little blue penguins spend about 80% of their lives at sea. They leave in the morning, spend the whole day fishing offshore, and come home every evening like they're catching the 6 o'clock train. The African penguin, the endangered donkey. Yes, a penguin in Africa on a hot beach, this is real. The African penguin lives along the southern coast of South Africa and Namibia. It's proof that penguins do not require ice. They sunbathe. They share beaches with tourists. There are colonies living right next to the town of Simonstown near Cape Town where you can walk among them. They are also critically endangered. 200 years ago, there were around 4 million of them. Today, there are fewer than 20,000. Overfishing wiped out their food supply, oil spills destroyed their habitat. They were reclassified as critically endangered in 2024, and without serious intervention, they could be functionally extinct within a generation. And fun fact here that African penguins are also called jackass penguins because they sound exactly like a braying donkey. There is no polite way to put this. They honk loudly. It's perfect. The macaroni, the rock star. Look at this bird, just look at it. The macaroni penguin has the most dramatic eyebrows in the animal kingdom. Long, bright, golden yellow crest feathers that shoot upward off its forehead like it got struck by lightning and decided to keep the hairstyle. The name comes from an 18th century term for a man who dressed extremely extravagantly and over the top, fashion obsessed dandy. When the first European explorers found these penguins, they looked at the golden crest and thought, yes, that's one's macaroni. They are also by sheer numbers the most common penguin on Earth, around 18 million of them. They live in enormous, chaotic colonies on sub-Antarctic islands, and the noise is apparently something you never forget. The Galapagos penguin, the impossible one. This one breaks every rule. The Galapagos penguin is the only penguin that lives north of the equator. It shares its beach with sea lions, marine iguanas, and tourists in shorts. The air temperature can reach 28 degrees Celsius. This penguin should not exist, and yet here it is. It survives because of a cold ocean current, the Humboldt Current, that sweeps up from Antarctica and keeps the waters around the Galapagos cold and full of fish. The penguin found the one loophole in the rules and moved in. Unfortunately, it's one of the rarest penguins on Earth, only around 1,200 left. Every El Nino event, when the ocean warms, devastates their food supply. They are hanging on by a thread. So, not the very fun fact, but to cool down in the heat, Galapagos penguins stand with their flippers stretched out away from their body, maximizing surface area so the heat escapes faster. The rock hopper, the one with gel hair. Rock hoppers don't walk up cliffs, they jump with both feet together, bouncing from rock to rock up sheer cliff faces in crashing waves to reach their nesting sites. It looks absolutely insane, and they do it every single season like it's nothing. They also have yellow spiky crest feathers, similar to the macaroni but wilder, more disheveled. To attract mates, they shake their heads rapidly to make the crest swing around. It's basically headbanging. Rock hoppers are the metal fans of the penguin world. 18 species, hot beaches, volcanic islands, rainforests, ice sheets. They've adapted to almost everywhere the southern hemisphere has to offer, and every single one of them, no matter the climate, no matter the species, survives the same way, together, which is what makes what happens next so strange. All right, you've met the family, you know how these animals work, you know what they're built for, what they need to survive, what they are capable of. So now let's go back to him. This is an Adelie penguin, filmed in Antarctica in 2007 by Werner Herzog for his documentary Encounters at the End of the World. Herzog wasn't even planning to make a penguin film. He explicitly told the people who founded the trip that it would not be about, in his words, fluffy penguins. And then he saw this. The penguin is walking away from his colony, not toward the sea where the food is, not back to the nesting ground, straight toward the mountains, approximately 70 kilometers inland into nothing. Herzog asked penguin scientist Dr. David Ainley, who was on site, what was happening, and Ainley's answer was fascinating and unsatisfying in equal measure. Herzog asks Dr. Ainley, is there such a thing as insanity among penguins? Could they just go crazy because they have had enough of their colony? Ainley says he's never seen a penguin bashing its head against a rock, but he does describe how penguins sometimes get disoriented and end up in places they simply shouldn't be, far from the ocean, heading nowhere. Then comes the detail that makes this story genuinely haunting. Herzog's crew tried to turn the penguin around. They physically redirected him back toward the colony and the sea. The penguin looked at them, then turned around and kept walking toward the mountains. Even when rescued, he went back. The direction was locked in. So, what is actually happening inside that penguin's brain? The honest answer is we don't fully know. There is surprisingly little peer reviewed research specifically on this behavior, but scientists have a few solid theories, and none of them are as poetic as the internet would like. The most likely explanation is neurological disorientation, some kind of failure in the penguin's internal navigation system. Remember how we talked about penguins using the sun, the stars, and Earth's magnetic field to find their way home? When that system breaks down from illness, injury, infection, or something going wrong in the brain, the penguin doesn't know it's broken. It thinks it's going the right way, it's following a signal. The signal is just wrong. Think of it like a GPS that's lost satellite connection, but it's still giving you confident directions. The penguin isn't choosing to die, it's following instructions from a system that has stopped working correctly. Illness or physical injury that disorients the animal, extreme stress during breeding season, and instinctual error, animals don't always make survival friendly decisions. In rare cases, scientists think the animal may be separating itself from the colony because it is sick, an almost involuntary quarantine response. That last one is worth sitting with. There are species, certain insects, for example, that, when infected with a pathogen, will voluntarily leave the colony and die alone rather than risk infecting others. The individual sacrifices itself to protect the group. It's hardwired. Whether penguins do this intentionally, whether there's any awareness in that walk, nobody can say for certain. But the possibility that this penguin's brain was in some way protecting the colony by living, it's one of the stranger ideas I've come across researching this video. And penguins aren't alone in this. There are documented cases across the animal kingdom of creatures doing things that look from the outside like walking toward their own end. Field biologist George Schaller once documented a water buffalo that had been severely mauled by lions. It escaped, made it back to its herd, was safe, and then inexplicably walked back out toward the lions and let them finish it. Nobody has a clean explanation for why. Delirium from the injuries, an instinct to draw predators away from the herd, or something else entirely. Lemmings famously were supposed to throw themselves off cliffs and mass suicides. This is completely false. It was a myth popularized by a 1950s Disney documentary that actually staged the footage. In reality, lemmings migrate when their population gets too large and sometimes drown crossing rivers by accident. There's no death wish, just bad luck in a river. But the myths stuck because humans are very good at projecting intention onto animals, especially when the behavior looks like something we might recognize in ourselves. So the real question the distinction between an animal whose navigation is broken and an animal that has chosen to live is one that science can't yet fully answer, and that is exactly why this penguin became a cultural moment. Herzog called it a death march. He was almost certainly right. The penguin walked approximately 70 kilometers inland. There is no food there, no water he could drink, no shelter. Temperatures at night dropped to minus 50. At some point, somewhere in that white silence, he stopped walking. We don't know exactly when, we don't know if he was in pain, we don't know what, if anything, he was experiencing in those final hours. What we do know is this: the colony survived. The rest of the Adelies went on. They found their food, raised their chicks, huddled through another Antarctic winter. Life continued, as it does. One penguin walked away, and we are still talking about it nearly 20 years later. Why? That's what the next section is about. We said earlier that penguins navigate using the sun, the stars, and Earth's magnetic field, and that when something goes wrong with that system, the penguin walks into the mountains instead of home. But let's actually look at what that system is, because it's one of the most remarkable things in biology, and it involves quantum physics. I'm not exaggerating. Birds and penguins have what scientists call a magnetic compass. It's not a metaphor. They literally sense the Earth's magnetic field and use it for direction. The question scientists spent decades trying to answer was how. Where in the body is this sensor? The answer, as of our best current understanding, is the eye. Inside the retina of birds, there is a protein called cryptochrome. When light hits it, something extraordinary happens at the quantum level. Pairs of electrons become what's called entangled, meaning they're linked to each other regardless of distance. The orientation of Earth's magnetic field changes the behavior of these electron pairs, and the bird's brain reads that change as a directional information. In other words, birds may literally see the magnetic field, not as a color or a shape we'd recognize, but as some kind of overlay, some additional layer of visual information that tells them which way is poleward and which way is equatorward. This mechanism relies on quantum entanglement, the same phenomenon Einstein called spooky action at a distance and thought was impossible in warm, wet biological environments. Birds prove him wrong. Every migrating bird, every homing pigeon, every Adelie penguin finding its way back to its nesting spot, possibly running quantum mechanics in its eyes to do it. So, what happens when it breaks? Research on birds shows that when the cryptochrome system is disrupted by illness, by abnormal light conditions, by interference, the animal doesn't just get a bit confused, it becomes completely disoriented. It commits to a direction with total confidence, and that direction is wrong. There is a specific pattern researchers call a fixed direction response. Under certain conditions where the normal compass is disrupted, birds lock onto a direction and won't deviate from it, even if you move them, even if the environment changes around them. They are certain, and certainty in this case is the most dangerous thing in the world. That phrase, fixed direction response, is almost certainly what we're watching in the viral penguin clip. His compass locked, the signal said this way, and he followed it across 70 kilometers of ice, all the way to the mountains, with complete, unshakable conviction. He wasn't lost, he wasn't confused in the way we'd be confused. He was following directions. The directions were just coming from a broken instrument. And here's where it gets uncomfortably close to home. The same brain circuit that governs navigation in birds, involving the hippocampus, the vestibular system, the thalamus, exists in humans almost identically. We don't have a magnetic compass, but we have the same fundamental wiring for orientation, for knowing where we are, for finding our way home. And when that circuit fails on humans, the result looks eerily familiar. One of the earliest and most devastating symptoms of Alzheimer's disease is getting lost. Not forgetting names or dates, those come later. The first thing to go is spatial navigation. People with early stage dementia wander. They leave their homes and can find their way back. They walk with purpose, with confidence toward somewhere that no longer exists in the brain's map. Their family turns them around and they walk back in the same direction again. Neuroscientists studying bird navigation and neuroscientists studying Alzheimer's disease are in many ways studying the same circuit. The hippocampus, the brain's mapping and memory center, degrades in both cases. The result in both cases is a creature following a broken signal with no awareness that the signal is broken. A penguin and an elderly person who can't find their way home. Different species, different causes, different lives, but the same fundamental failure of the same ancient biological system. There's something about that parallel that I find genuinely moving. Not in a sad way, or not only in a sad way, but in the sense that it reveals something true about what we are. We are, at our most basic level, creatures that need to know where home is. And when that knowledge fails, whether you're a penguin in Antarctica or a person in a care home in another city, the body keeps moving. It keeps searching. It just can't find what it's looking for. But here's the thing. The internet didn't go viral over a penguin with a broken compass. They didn't caption it, "This is what Alzheimer looks like in birds." They called it the nihilist penguin. They said same. They called it brave. They called it free. Why? And what does that tell us about us? And here's the thing. The people saying that weren't wrong about how it felt. They were just wrong about what it meant. The penguin wasn't being brave. He wasn't rejecting society. He wasn't choosing freedom. His navigation system had failed and he was walking to his death following a broken signal. But that's almost irrelevant because what the meme reveals is something true about the people watching it, not the penguin. Millions of people looked at a bird walking calmly toward its own death and felt understood. That is worth sitting with for a second. What does it say about how people are feeling? That this is the image they chose to identify with? The urge to walk away from the group is not new. It might be one of the oldest human impulses there is. In the 3rd century, a movement called the Desert Fathers emerged in Egypt. Christians who felt that society had become too noisy, too corrupt, too consuming, and so they walked out into the desert and lived alone. Not to die, to think, to find something they couldn't find in the crowd. In 1845, a 27-year-old American writer named Henry David Thoreau built a small cabin near Walden Pond in Massachusetts and moved in. He wanted, in his own words, to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. He was exhausted by what society expected of him. He wanted out, not forever, but long enough to remember who he was. Every generation has its version. The 1960s had the Back to the Land movement, the 1990s had the grunge dropout, the 2010s had the minimalists and the van lifers, the 2020s gave us quiet quitting, the idea of mentally checking out while physically staying put, not walking away, just stopping caring. The most penguin-like option for all, perhaps, without the dramatic scenery. And every single time the impulse comes from the same place. The colony asks too much. The noise is too loud. The rules feel arbitrary. And something in us looks toward the mountains and thinks, what if I just kept walking? Here's the tension though, and I think this is the most honest thing in the whole video. Penguins survive because they stay together. We've established that. The colony is not optional. It's the mechanism of survival. An emperor penguin alone in Antarctic winter is a dead emperor penguin. The huddle is everything. And humans are not so different. Every study on loneliness and health tells the same story. Isolation is one of the most damaging things a person can experience. Loneliness raises the risk of early death more than obesity does, more than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The colony for us, too. It's not optional. We need other people. We are built for it at the deepest biological level. And yet, and yet we look at a penguin walking away from everything that would keep him alive and we feel something. Not pity, not horror, recognition. Maybe that's what Thoreau was actually trying to say. Not that the colony is bad, but that you have to occasionally step back from it to remember why you're in it. He didn't abandon Concord. He built his cabin half a mile away. He went back for dinner. The penguin who walked away had no choice. His compass was broken. But we do have a choice. The question the meme quietly asks, whether it means to or not, is whether your compass is working. Whether you know the difference between genuinely needing rest and space and following a broken signal toward something that looks like freedom, but it is actually just cold and empty and far from the sea. That's a harder question than any meme caption, and it's the only one you can answer. But the penguin asked it in his own small, waddling, accidentally profound way. He asked it. We started here. A few minutes ago, when you first saw this, you probably felt something vague, something between funny and sad, a little bird going the wrong way. Now you know what you're actually looking at. A member of a species that survived 60 million years by adapting to every hostile environment the planet threw at them. A bird that can outswim an Olympic athlete, filter salt water through its face, run quantum mechanics through its eyes to navigate by magnetic fields, and endure months of Antarctic winter by sharing warmth with strangers. And somewhere in that extraordinary, ancient, almost indestructible biology, something small went wrong. A signal misfired. A compass pointed the wrong way, and he followed it, because that's what he was built to do, follow the signal home. The signal just wasn't going home anymore. We will never know exactly what that penguin experienced in those final hours, whether there was a confusion, whether there was something like peace, whether there was anything at all beyond the simple mechanical following of an instruction that no longer made sense. Science can tell us the mechanism. It can't tell us the experience. And I think that gap, that space between what we can measure and what it actually felt like, is exactly where the meme lived, where millions of people quietly placed themselves and said, yes, I know something about that. We don't fully understand why penguins do this. We don't fully understand our own navigation, what pulls us toward things that are bad for us, what makes us follow signals that have long since stopped leading anywhere good. The penguin just made it visible, waddling and small and impossible to look away from. But here's what I want to leave you with. Right now, as you watch this, there are roughly 4 million Adelie penguins alive in Antarctica. Hundreds of emperor penguin colonies are huddled together in the dark, rotating slowly, keeping each other warm. Gentoo penguins are hitting 36 kilometers an hour through freezing water. A male macaroni somewhere is shaking his ridiculous golden crest at a female who may or may not be impressed. An African penguin is honking like a donkey on a beach in Cape Town. A tiny little blue is commuting home from the ocean as the sun sets over Australia right on schedule. 60 million years of survival. Ice ages, mass extinctions, shifting continents, warming oceans, and they are still here, still waddling, still together. One walked away, the rest stayed, and because they stayed, there are millions more. That penguin never made it home, but he made us think about what home means, why we need it, and what happens when the thing inside us that knows the way back stops working. That's not nothing. For a small bird walking into the mountains, that's actually quite a lot.